folks, and welcome to the channel, or welcome back. And this is part number 2 of 2. And in part number 1 we took the whole front apart of this Konick race car. We cleaned it all up, we repainted it, we checked it out, we greased it, and we were planning to put it all back together in one video, but that took too long, so this is now part number 2 where we go in to put everything back together in the front. Meanwhile, I have already painted the front part of the Konick race car in glossy black paint. I'm going to try to get all the loose paint off, especially where the brake master cylinders have been, because the brake fluid has eaten away some of that paint. So I want to have this quite smooth before we go in to repaint this front part here. Now the paint that I'm going to use is industrial paint that you use for steel beams, because that's a really good paint, all in one go. It's primer and final paint. And while this is drying, we're going to work first of all a bit in the cockpit to sort out the wiring loom, to sort out all the cabling, the hydraulics, and so on, the steering wheel, the seats, a lot of work to be done inside the cockpit. And then we come back to the front. Meanwhile, this can dry up, and I will have to put up the blower because it's a bit cold here and I can't push it in the paint booth, because normally I would paint in the paint booth, but this time I did not paint it in the paint booth because I couldn't move it. It has no wheels. So actually I screwed myself. Anyhow, let's start to look inside the cockpit. So I unscrewed the seat so that seat can go out. There's going to be a little bit of work on that seat, but otherwise it's still intact, it's not cracked, so I'm just going to clean it up. So the harness is something that has had better days, so we're going to put a new one in because it's all about safety. I've taken out the seat and also took off the old 6-point safety harness, because that's totally wasted, so that is something we'll have to replace. And then I cleaned the whole cockpit inside, and overall the cockpit looks pretty good. The frame or the space structure is not rusted at all or corroded. There's a few chips of paint off. This side is quite alright. The other side is having a few chips, and I'll show you that. This is what we're going to paint. And then I have the wiring loom, which is going to the front dashboard. And I don't like it like this, being kind of naked inside the cockpit. I'm going to put it inside a tube. And I'm going to use what we call an insulation tube that we use in airco systems. And what I've done is I cut a slit along the one side. Where is it? Because I got to find it. Right. So now I can put that cabling right inside there, and then I will be able to run it on the floor all the way back to the cockpit. So that will be then protected a lot better. I also got my brake line, and I've got also my clutch line. Those will go on the bottom as well. And then I have my throttle cable, which is going to go on the supports right here. And this is how I'm going to run this. Here you can actually see the chips of paint that came off on the frame structure. But this is nothing. I'm just going to sand this down a bit and tape it off, and then paint this with a brush where I need to, including the A-frame with some new fresh paint. Now over here, that's where the shocks are going, and you can see there's some paint chipped off again. This is going to be pretty easy painting. Degreasing it, sanding it down, degreasing it, and then we're just going to paint it with a brush again. Because all this is hidden way underneath the dashboard. And those are the pedal supports, and they're going to need a little bit of paint as well, because I think what happened in the past is that the braking fluid was spilled out as well, and that's how it took the paint off. Especially here on the clutch side. But again, this is pretty easy stuff to paint. Alright, so now it's a lot of cleaning up and degreasing. Now once that is done, we put some tape up, just like we done here, and then we're going to paint some of these bars with a brush. Now I like to use brake cleaner for this, and this just works fine. I never had an issue with that. I'm going to prepare the tie wraps so I can tie down both the flexible hoses for the clutch and the rear brakes, but also the wiring loom. For the wiring loom, I'm going to place it inside this insulation tube, which I have cut open already. Here is that cut, so all I need to do now is to put that inside and then rotate this properly. And then we should have a proper insulated wiring loom so it doesn't get any cuts while you're racing. So the wiring loom is getting slowly into place. It's a little bit of fiddling with all these tie wraps, but at the end it will be a very tight fit. I placed both hydraulic lines for the brakes and the clutch on the bottom of the frame. And then I have the wiring loom all the way on the top here in this insulated tube, and also with tie wraps attached to the frame. And then the throttle cable is going right here, right? So, and that way I have a very secure setup and nothing is going to get loose. And it's all out of the way, and it's easy accessible as well if I have to get to it, but I don't think I will have to. I'm going to remove the stick shift and then clean it up a bit and then see how the bearings are like. This is a sequential gearbox because this car has actually a motorbike engine in it, which is really handy because otherwise you have to shift like in H form. Here it's all sequential. The only drawback is I have no reverse, so that means pushing. Good. And now we need to undo the last one and we should be good to go. Okay. And the old harness isn't really something I can recover. First of all, it's no longer approved. It expired by far and it looks real tacky. I almost think that a dog must have been sleeping in it. And look how dirty that is. So this is going to go in the trash can and we're going to order up a brand new one. The fire extinguisher is expired and this is a 1 kilogram powder extinguisher. Not really something you want to have in a monocoque car. It's also steel, so it's pretty heavy. I could replace it with an OMP approved FIA fire extinguisher, but that's too big. I can't really fit that, so I need to find something in the middle. I'm going to replace it with a FIA approved 2 kilogram aluminum based bottle, which is much lighter than the other one. It comes with its own straps, so we can strap it in. And I think this is just going to fit. This is just on the edge, but this will be okay. And fire extinguishers always have an expiry date, and you can see it's going to be good until 2025 in December, and then it needs to be verified or maybe even refilled. So I'm going to mark it when I'm putting it into service. So this is 2021 and it's going to be in December. Now initially I planned to go for an automatic system for the fire extinguisher, but I guess I'm going to do one more season without it and until I find a small bottle, because most of these bottles are fairly big. And this bottle is already 2 kilograms and it's already on the large side for this race car. So here we have the seat, and somebody made a piece of foam in the back to make it a bit softer, because the seat is not much, is it? There's a couple of big holes. This is for the seat belts, the 6-point harness, I should say. For the rest, that thingy is from polyester and that looks still intact. It's not cracked or broken, but it looks really a little bit tacky, I think. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wash this out and then clean it out, and then maybe I just paint a little bit here and there where the paint is gone, and then I'm going to put in some new softener pads inside. Adhesive pads here of thick foam from Sparco, so they're going to go in the back. I have some from the front, and I'll see where we place them. I'm not quite sure exactly where I'm going to place them, but I also have them on the side, so we can stick them in like so. I might have to trim them a little bit, and that will make it a little bit softer. Of course, this is not the softest seat you can think, but that's not the point of racing I know some seats you can actually put a bag of foam in it, and then you sit in it, you mold it, and then you put a hardener inside that foam, and then you have a real tight fit. But I'm not going to do this. This seat is already very narrow, so that wouldn't make a lot of sense. So let me start cleaning this up, and then we apply these parts here, and then we will install the seat inside the cockpit. So let's put the seat in and see if it fits. We put a screwdriver through the hole and see where we line up. Okay, that's one. And that's two. So the seat is now bolted in, and I think it's looking quite all right. I'm just going to give it a try to see how it sits, and making sure that the pedals are on the right distance, although they are not in yet. So let's see how this fits, or how this sits actually. So this feels good and snug. Let's see. And it's tight, but that's perfectly for me. I'm really caught in it, and this is what you should have. You should be caught in the seat. It should not be loose. So it really supports me, and I'm sure that I can use the pedals. That feels good because I have like enough plate. I can even touch the front plate with the tip of my toes, so that's good. The extinguisher is not in the way, and the steering wheel is about here. So stick shift, yeah. I think that's all right. We're going to install first of all the lower wishbone, and for that one I need to insert the ball joints. Now I'm going to put the ball joints in at a certain depth. I don't know yet exactly what depth it should be, because that's all part of the alignment of the suspension. But I'm going to give it sufficient insert into this metal threaded part, because that's where the strength is. So always put it deep enough and then start adjusting outwards from that point. And I think this is about right. Now I'm going to set all of them about the same, and then later when we do the alignment of the car, we'll sort it all out. So the first thing we're going to install is the lower wishbone, and for that I'm going to put some anti-corrosion grease up, especially in the areas where we have the bolts going through. That never hurts, and if I have to take it apart later, it's always easier. Very easily, I hope. Yep, let me just put this bolt through so it doesn't fall down. We'll take care of it later, and now we're going to install it here on this side. Here comes the bolt with the new washer. And goes in nicely. Washer on the back. And a spare and a new locking nut, a new washer in the bottom, and of course a new self-locking nut. So now we do the upper wishbone, and again I'm putting some anti-corrosion or corrosion blocking grease up. All right. So now we're going to install the upright. And again, the ball joints will be installed on both sides in the same distance away from the wishbone. But I have no idea of the actual adjustment, and that's something we'll do later, not right now. All right, I think this is good. You want to make sure that this is deep enough inside the holder, because that's where all the strength is. And on the bottom now we can place a washer because we have no ball joint, and of course we will install a new locking nut. Alright, so much for the upright, and I think this already feels good. And now we're going to put the bolts all to the proper tension. So the two wishbones are now installed, and there is no more play on it that we had before, so that is good. And the upright is now free to move around, of course. We have not adjusted anything yet, camber or caster or even toe in or toe out. That will come later. But all by all, this now looks and feels good, and now we are ready to continue by putting up the shock absorber. For the coilover, I'm first going to install the lever, and I want to make sure that all the bushings are absolutely clean. Because that has to go inside. All right. So let's clean that up a little bit. Put some anti-corrosion grease up again. Many people will say that is not necessary because you have steel on the brass insert. Yeah, that might be true, but I still like to have some anti-corrosion up on the steel part. There we go. So this guy can now go inside, and that's going to be a little bit more difficult to show it to you, but I'm going to try. If we can get it in. All right, so now we need to put the shock absorber right in here to the top. All right, so here are the shocks. Now, keep in mind that I have not installed any preload on any of the shocks. I will do that later once we have this car on the scales. Let's see if this is easier from this side. Yeah, that seems to be good. As you can see, this is always a little bit of fiddling. I have not put the spring yet to its proper load or preload. This is something we'll do once the car is fully assembled and on the ground, and then we'll adjust the preload on the car. So now it's time for the rod, which is going to the upright and to the suspension or the coilover. And this is the lever arm, and this is a very important bar, which also will need its own adjustment over time, but not right now. Put that in and see if we can hold this properly in place. And now we need to move it to the top of the wishbone, and then we should be good. So let's install this rod and see how easy we can get it in there. It shouldn't be that difficult to get it in. All right, so. Yep, and now we just need to tighten it up, and the right suspension is almost complete. So next up is installing the bearing and the wheel hub, and I have for that a brand new kit here because the old bearing was worn out. And here is it, brand new, looking really nice. We'll also install new wheel studs because the old ones, well, you never know what happened with them. So these will go in there. We will use some Loctite to lock it in place. And we have galvanized bolts to hold the wheel bearing and the wheel hub onto the upright. So let's install it. Not easy access. So now it's time for the new studs. And for that, I'm going to use some Loctite on that, because you don't want these to get loose. All right, so now I'm going to use some nuts to tighten these up. So this is what we call nut and counter nut. So I'm going to connect them both to each other tight, and then I can turn in the stud or tighten up the stud. Now to tighten up the stud, I will have to hold the bearing, and I have a lever for that. That will just do it. Okay, that's good enough. And now I can undo these two nuts again. And we'll do the next one. This is so funny, guys, because I forgot the brake plate to mount it in between the wheel bearing and the upright. So I had to take it off again, and now I'm putting it all back together. This is sometimes how it goes, you know. You talk and talk and talk, and then you forget that you have to put a piece in. But that's okay. I mean, it's not a big deal. That's just putting it back up, and then we are all done. Doesn't take that long, especially with new bolts. Things go very smoothly. With older parts, that can be a bit more annoying, but with new parts, that's a piece of cake to do, right? All right, so it's almost back up. Still have to do the lower bolts, and then we should be good. So the next step is to install the new discs, and these are solid discs. I did not go for vented discs. Hold them in place, and then we put the brakes up. I will still have to degrease the disc. It's always a little bit of turning around. Here we go. No, it's like this. So I keep missing it. All right. These are new discs. I did measure them compared with the old ones, and they were exactly the same. So I should have no issue with that. But you never know. Sometimes you may have to put some spacers up or some washers. It depends a bit. Let me put the bottom bolt up. These bolts are in awkward position, especially the top one. For that I need a special wrench, and luckily I had this wrench. So this is a special bend wrench, handy for small corners or small bends where your normal socket won't fit. This looks quite all right. So now I'm going to degrease the disc, and for that I'm using Brake Clean Pro. Good stuff to degrease it. So let's do that first. You can of course also spray on the disc. So degreasing the disc is always very important. If not, then your brakes will not function that well. Next are the new Brembo discs, and they should in smoothly in here. I already have the back one in, as you can see. So now we can put the brake caliper up. So here's our new brake caliper, and I'm going to put up a little bit of this copper grease right on the cylinder. The cylinder which is pushing the brake pad against the disc, and also the side where it pushes on that pad there. Not a lot, just a little bit. And it has to go behind these springs. So we need to push that in like so. And it's a real tight fit, but it will fit. All right. And on the bottom, it needs to go in, but almost. Yep, that's in. That's where we want to have it. And now I have to put these shims in, and I have those shims right here. This is how they are supposed to go in. They can be a little bit hard to get in, but they will go in. All right. So let's put the bottom one in. That's good. And the back, so I can turn it open and get this guy actually in there. Once it starts to move, and that was of course the wrong hammer. I shouldn't have been using this. And that's it. It's in place. And we'll put a split pin in so we can secure this part here. All right. So I've got two brand new copper washers for the banyo connection for the brake line. That's these washers right here. Now for the moment, I'm not gonna hook anything up yet because I still have to do the other side. But I'm just preparing it. We're also going to put in a new bleeding nipple because the old one is a little bit tacky. Now I don't need to tighten all this down yet because we still will have to bleed the system. but I just want to have things in place. Just by the time we do it, then I don't lose my parts. So the right hand suspension is now complete, including the discs and the brakes, and everything seems to be working quite smoothly. There's no more play, and everything rotates as it should rotate. The brake pads are new, the caliper has been renewed. So all what's left here is to hook up the brake lines and bleed the whole system. But first of all, I need to do the left-hand side, and then we put the steering rack up, and then we can actually continue with the brakes themselves. So the next thing we need to do is to install the rack and pinion. And let's see how we're going to do this. And this is going this way. And I'm going to try to put this up as good as I can, because I'm working on my own and that's always a little bit difficult. But if I can get the top part up, then I should be good. I'm just going to put this up so it stays in place, and then I will put all the washers up that are supposed to be up. So I have installed temporarily the steering column just to make sure that I can rotate the rack and pinion, but now I'm going to tighten up these bolts a little bit and try to center it. So I'm going to try to align first of all the steering house, so finding the center position and then trying to get the rack and pinion also in the middle position. Okay, first of all, to find the center of the car, and I'm going to do it in the front here, and it's at around 15. So now let's see where that center would come out. So that would be here and here. So this is the center of my car. It probably is not the center of the rack and pinion, because I think it extends a bit here. So the next thing I want to do is to center my rack and pinion so that actually I have the same deflection left and right. So therefore I'm going to move it all the way to the left, then measure the distance from this point all the way to the tip, and then I'm just going to do the opposite. I'm going to move it all the way to the other side and then measure the distance again, and then the difference between those two extremes I will divide that by 2, and that I will subtract from the maximum extension, and that should be the middle position. So let me first go to the extreme left turn. That's where we are, and that distance I can now measure. So this will be, let's say 33. Remember, 33. Now I'm going to go to completely the opposite side. 44. So that's a difference of 11 divided by 2. That is 5.5. So 33 plus 5 is 38.5 should be my middle position. So let me just do that. 38.5. 38.5. I think that is it. 38.5. So now we have our center position, and I'm going to mark this so I know exactly where that is, and I'm going to mark it right here in the cockpit, so that makes it a bit easier. So the rod is connected to the steering house, and now I'm going to connect the upright towards the rod. And remember that I have turned the steering wheel extremely to the left now. And I do have some markers up, because that's the kind of thing you need to do. Make sure you have the markers up. I'm not going to tighten it down yet. I'm going to see how the other side goes, and then we'll check it out. I'm having the rack and pinion in place. Everything is now connected. I just put a wheel up. I'm going to put the other wheel up on the other side. But of course, nothing is aligned so far. The caster is not, the camber is not, and certainly not the toe in. So all this is now done more or less on eyesight. A lot of the bolts are not locked in place, as you can see, and the reason for that is that I still have to do the final adjustments once the car is completely finished in the back, because then I'm going to put it on the ground, the level ground, and then we can do all the adjustments. The same thing is true for the shock absorbers I have not done any preload settings. So let me put that wheel up and see more or less what the toe-in looks like. I think it will be more or less all right. But then again, the only proof is by eating the pudding, as they say. Now I have to say, the steering house was a bit of fiddling. I haven't shown you all the little adjustments I had to do to move it left and right. Just gonna lock it a little bit in place. Just so I don't lose the bolts or the nuts. So let's see if I turn the steering wheel. What I see now is I have a little bit of toe in. Or that's more toe out, I think. Okay. That should be about it. How is this guy doing? Well, that's a bit of toe in as well. So I think both wheels are more or less okay. So let's see if I do a full turn, what happens. Yeah, shorter turn, wider turn. Okay. So that looks all right. So I think this can stay as is for the moment. Last night it was quite late. In fact, it was 1 o'clock in the morning, as you can tell on the bags under my eyes. And we almost finished the suspension and the brake system on the Konick race car. There's still a couple of small things to do, like bleeding the brakes, the pedals, the dashboard, the steering wheel, and some other small stuff. And that's what we're going to do in the next video. So I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.